Okay, guys, so with me, I have Elan, and we were embarking into a cool conversation, I think, about the origin story of your name because I asked her, how do I pronounce your name? And it's Elan, which is beautiful. And then share with my audience what you just told me. What was it going to be? Your parents almost named you what?
They almost named me Blue Sky Powder Day because they were both hippie ski bums living in Telluride, Colorado. And they were like, what's our favorite thing in the whole world? I'm
That's
like,
kind of awesome. But I'm glad they didn't do it. But I'm glad they
for,
didn't end up doing it.
for real. Me
A
too.
blue sky powder day. Okay, now I get it because when you're skiing, you want a blue skies and powder. My mind first went cocaine. Of course, that's where my brain went. But yeah, blue sky powder. I love this. It's amazing.
Then they found this philosopher named Henry Bergson who came up with this philosophical principle called Elan Vital, which means the essential force that makes all life possible. It's
Oh,
like
that's cool.
the spark of life, and then so they named me that instead, which was a lot to live up to. So
Yeah. Well, but you're doing it. You're doing somatic therapy. And the reason I was so, as soon as you DM'd me, I like immediately was interested and intrigued in what you do because somatic work is something that you don't hear a lot about. And that I was really interested in at one point, I think before I got sober. I was even looking at schools where they like work on somatic therapy, and we'll get there into what that is. But let's talk about how you ended up where you are. So you grew up in Telluride in Colorado?
yes, I grew up in Telluride, Colorado. My mom had a tofu shop, a restaurant, and my dad was the dishwasher there.
Okay.
And they were both, well, my mom was a ski instructor, and then my dad became one later. And I was raised like on the summers in on Grateful Dead tour.
Oh, you toured with your parents? What?
Yes, my dad sold food in the parking lot.
So wait, what does that look like? Does that mean you're in a car and you follow their bus and then you camp in their parking lot when they're at their concerts?
I wish we followed their bus, but we followed them from like during the summer tour, we would follow them from place to place where they were performing, and we would we had a truck, we'd sell stir fry out of the back of the truck with a little griddle.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Okay, so follow, because I don't even know what that means, but following a band would mean you're not necessarily on the road behind them, but you know, because you know their tour dates, and you're like, okay, next stop, they're going to be in Wichita, so let's go.
Totally. It's like,
Okay.
and it's just being like in love with a band. And so you want to go to all their concerts. And so my parents were very much in love, my dad specifically. And then it escalated, and we would go to like Lollapalooza tour
Oh, that's kind
and
of
with,
cool.
yeah, and then like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Pearl Jam and Ministry and Ice Cube. And then we would go to Horde tour with, who was on that one? Like Widespread Panic and Fish and Blues Traveler. So
Wow. So, did you camp in a tent in the parking lot or did you sleep in the truck? What kind of vehicle are you driving around in?
it was different sort of situations. I remember one time when I was 9 years old, I was on Horde tour, which is Horizons of Rock Developing Everywhere. And it was Widespread Panic and Fish and Blues Traveler. And my dad actually had a food booth inside the festival, so it wasn't in the parking lot anymore. And we caught a ride. It was me and him, even though I have some siblings. And we caught a ride with someone in an RV. And from one tour date to the next tour date, and we had stopped in Louisiana, and we were at this chicken place, and we see some cops outside around the RV. And I was like, what is going on? So I'm really young and I don't really understand. And then the person who gave us the ride had a bunch of glass pipes that he had in the RV. And I go out there and I'm like, what is going on? And my dad had gone out there and he had a bunch of drugs in the van or in the RV. So he ran and he had a bunch of ecstasy that he tried to swallow. And
Your
so he
dad?
was,
Your dad?
yes.
Oh my gosh.
So I was 9 years old and I came out there and I saw him get out of the van and run, and a bunch of cops tackle him with guns to his head
Oh my
while he's
gosh.
trying to swallow the drugs in front of me. And it was really intense. And at that moment, he's pretty much my dad got full custody when I was 2 years old. And so it was he was my only parent. And so that was a pretty traumatic event to witness. And then we spent the night, he was arrested. He got bailed out by his parents, and we were at the cop station overnight, and they had to come get me. It was a really intense experience, but that was kind of like chaos was the norm for me when I was
Okay.
young.
Okay. Okay. So they let you, in that particular instance, they let you sit in the station all night until he got out the next day. Wow. It's a good thing they didn't throw you into Louisiana social services. Jeez. It's a good thing they actually like waited, you know what I mean, to let him out. Wow, that's wild. Okay. So were you going to school during the year? How did you do academically when you were going to school?
My parents played it pretty fast and loose. My dad had a couple different girlfriends growing up that were like mother figures to me. My mom remarried to who turned out to be a complete drug addict and very much disequilibrated and psychotic.
Wait, what was the first word you said? Disequilibrated?
Disequilibrated, like not equilibrated, like balanced in his life.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Does that mean emotionally unbalanced or like your career and your place you live in don't make any sense? Which
All of
I've
that
been in.
doesn't make any sense.
All right, okay, okay.
We've all
All
been
right.
there.
Yeah. No, I was like teaching bar at a really nice studio once, riding my bike there from a cell phone store that I was living in. So like that means disequilibrated. Am I saying it
Yeah,
right? Disequilibrated?
disequilibrated. Like
Okay, I like this
equilibration.
word.
Equilibration is like when
Yeah.
you're feeling
Okay.
balance.
Got it.
So anyway, like my life when I was younger, it was that way. You know, it was imbalanced. I really didn't know, like, I didn't understand any sort of regulation. I didn't have rules. It wasn't necessary that I did homework. I was homeschooled for part of my life. We lived in Crestone, Colorado, which is a total hippie place. And I went to a school called Turtle Island.
Called what
And
island?
it was Turtle Island.
Oh, that sounds awesome. But it's school, so like I don't know.
No, it was like alternative. It was like we do yoga, and then
That's
maybe we'll
cool.
learn a little French, and then garden for a while, like whatever kind of cool new trending new age whitey lighty power crystals shit is happening in the world.
Did you like touring with the Grateful Dead and stuff like that in the summers, or would you rather stay home and play with your friends? Or did you like going?
I was a wild child and I was into it. I think. I mean, there was obviously no stability within it. You know, there was no rules. I remember when I was 8 years old on Lollapalooza tour, and my dad had a burrito stand at that time. He was selling burritos, and I was just off in the crowd. I was off doing whatever I wanted to do. There was this Jim Rose circus sideshow that there was like all these weird people lifting up stuff with their piercings and like weird, crazy stuff. And I was young and I would just run around and hang out with whoever I wanted to. But what I realized later upon my own evolution and my journey through sobriety is the need that I had was for boundaries. And I didn't have them from the time that I was a little. And with my own children, I make sure that they feel safe in that way because there's a sense of safety and care that comes with boundaries. And when you don't have them, it doesn't feel like you're cared about.
Right, totally. I get that. Yeah. So when's the first time you get high?
So I don't remember. There's two instances that I recall. Was one, we were driving, I think we were on tour, and it was me and my dad, and we were in this old Toyota Tercel with a bunch of bumper stickers on it. And we called it the stink mobile. It totally smelled. And he was smoking some pot, and he said, I know you're going to try this eventually, so you might as well try it with me. And I remember thinking, I've already done this before, and he doesn't know it, but whatever.
Oh, okay. And how old are you in this moment?
It was probably around 7 or 8,
Oh
something
God.
like that.
Oh, and you had already smoked weed?
Yeah, it's like that kind of. It's like Drew Barrymore type of shit. I'm about to get
Okay.
into.
And at 7 or 8, he said, "You can smoke this with me?" Or you
Yes,
might
and
as
I
well try it. Okay.
might as well try it. It's going to
Okay.
happen eventually.
Did you in that moment smoke weed with him?
Yes,
Oh, you did. Okay. All right.
yes.
Okay. And that's one of your first memories of that, of smoking weed, is that.
It was one of my first memories. And then when I was about 9 years old, we were traveling around Mexico. We would do these like low budget travels around Mexico. And we were on a hike. We went to a rainbow gathering down there. It was in Palenque, Mexico. And we went to a rainbow gathering, and there was this little dude who came out of the forest, and he was saying like muchos colores. And he sold, I don't know why I remember this. I think they told me later, but they sold my dad and his girlfriend an ounce of mushrooms for $7. And they made a tea with it. and we were going to see a waterfall the next day, and they made a tea with it, and they were just giving the kids, it was me and my older brother and his girlfriend's two kids, and they were passing around the mushroom tea that they made, and all of a sudden they realized that it was so strong, and they were like, get it away from the kids, get it away from the kids.
But you'd already had some?
We already drank some.
So what happened?
Well, it's so interesting because when you're a little kid, you're learning everything for the first time. And so it's really hard to understand an altered sense of consciousness upon reflection. And so to me, it was like this place was so magical. I couldn't believe it. This waterfall was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And there's some pictures of us there. And from what I was told, I was like dancing for a bunch of Japanese tourists and like,
My God, this sounds unsafe. Like, it's kind of cool, but it's kind of unsafe, right? Like, would you do this with your kids? No.
absolutely not. I'm like the opposite with my children for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, so that was, and then I remember on that same trip, I was running around the place the rainbow gathering was, and I stubbed my toe, and my toenail came off, and my parents gave me a shot of tequila and half of Vicodin to help with the pain. And I remember, and this is the one that really stands out to me, is that I felt safe for the first time in my life. I felt like I was in a cocoon of safety when I was sitting in a hammock, but it was like I was always kind of on edge, scared, I realized, because of the circumstances of my life. And I felt like someone finally put a weighted blanket over me, and I felt okay. And I was like, I want more of this. I don't know really what this is, but I need more of this because I want to feel safe.
As a combination, you think of the opiate and the alcohol. That combination in particular made you feel that way?
Yes, now upon even more, and we'll get more into this too, but
The
opiates
opiate in
became
particular. Yeah. Okay.
became like the key to me once I really got into that later in my story.
I bet so many people will resonate with what you just said. I've never heard it described that way, but a weighted blanket. I bet a lot of people, as soon as they hear that, are going to think, oh, yeah, that's right. I've never heard it described that way, but that's accurate. You know, I love that. Okay. So you're 9 and you have your first opiate. And then how do we progress from there?
As I said, I had an immediate affinity for it because it made me have that sense of safety. And so anytime when drugs and alcohol were becoming a little more prevalent for people in the ski town. I was back in Telluride at that time. Around like 7th grade, we were starting to drink and people were starting to get into it. And it was kind of like whatever was passed my way was good with me. And I remember also having this feeling where we would find some alcohol from our parents, like liquor cabinet, or from wherever, get someone to buy alcohol for us, and we would drink on the weekends. And I remember everybody else drinking and then being satisfied the next day to not drink again. And I was never wired like that. I was never wired like that. I was like, wait, I don't understand, because to me, I feel better when I'm drunk. So why wouldn't you want to be drunk all the time? And how come you guys don't feel this way? And so it was a pretty immediate transition for me to want to drink excessively.
Okay. Do you end up graduating from high school?
Well, yes, but I took a roundabout way to get there. So I went to my first treatment center when I was 12 or 13, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona. And I just remember thinking, oh, well, I'm not doing meth, so I'm not so bad, you know?
What caused you to get sent to treatment? What happened?
It was just excessive drinking whenever I could and smoking pot.
And your parents knew. They could tell. Your dad knew.
It was when this started to happen, like where my dad was starting to notice that something wasn't right. It's because he started getting his life together at this point. Like
okay.
he started sobering up. He married my stepmom, who was very straight edge, and she was really all about boundaries. And so she started trying to lay down the law, it turns out you can't do it reversed.
Yeah.
You can't have no boundaries someone's whole life and then give them boundaries when you're supposed to actually like give them more freedom.
Right. At about that age, in the adolescent age, right? Okay. Okay.
So they were trying to do it the opposite way, which I totally rebelled against that, of course. And then so I went to my first treatment center, and I was high the day after I got out. It was a month long. And then my mom actually came and visited me while I was in treatment 2 weeks into it in Phoenix and took me to the zoo and got me high and then dropped me back off at the treatment center while I was high.
You guys smoked weed together? What did you guys do?
We went to the zoo when she was smoking weed, and I was
But
like,
weed is the drug, I'm asking. Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's what you guys did. Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah. And then she dropped me off, and I was like, so high. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is really uncomfortable.
That's
Like,
terrifying.
and then, so that, and that didn't take, obviously, I started smoking pot right again and drinking right when I got out. I got in trouble when I was 15 years old. I was drinking with some friends and we got arrested. There was 4 of us and we got taken to the cops station in Telluride. And I escaped from my handcuffs and escaped the cop station and was running. And then I realized, I was like, shit, they arrested me by name. Like,
Oh,
what am I doing?
yeah.
Like,
Wait, how'd you get out of your handcuffs? Because you're so small, you just slipped out?
yes.
Okay.
I slipped out because I was very young. I slipped out. Well, because there was only one cop on duty because it's a really small town. Telluride's a super small town. And then I came
And
back.
you booked
and,
it. So you went back? You escaped and went back? Okay.
yes, because I was like, what am I doing? I'm about to like freaking leave town? Like,
I can't believe, but I can't believe you put that together because at 31, when I got arrested for a DUI, I gave him a fake social security number and I thought it was brilliant. And then at court, my mom was like, no, Janine, it's connected to your driver's license. So you just gave yourself a fake alias, which is much, much worse. And I was 31. So I can't believe at 15 you put that together and fucking went back. That's awesome.
Then I knocked on the door and I was like, hi. And then they like double handcuffed me to a chair. And it was like one of the chairs that a rolly chair. And so I was like kicking off everything and rolling around and spinning around and stuff. And basically after that, they had me take a psych evaluation. And they said if I didn't answer accurately, then they would know. And I stupidly believed that because my friends who they took the same evaluation lied. And I told the truth about my whole past, what I'm telling you now. And they had like some probation and I got sent to a lockdown facility in Provo, Utah for 18 months.
Oh shit. One of those like kid schools, wilderness kid schools. Oh no. Is it one of the ones that has been since like closed down and
Yes.
Oh
it was closed down.
What's it called?
It was called Discovery Academy.
Okay. I just listened to, so I'm not a true crime person at all, but I have recently started listening to one crime podcast. It just allows me to like turn my brain off. And they shared a story about one of these places in Utah. And I won't give anything away, but it's like horrific what happened to this poor kid. So they sent you away for 18 months. Did your dad have to agree to that? Or was it the typical, like they convinced him it's a good idea, so he agreed? Oh, plus the stepmom's involved now too.
Stepmom's involved. She wanted me out of the picture too. I was heinous, and she was like, oh, great. This is perfect. Right. Gone for 18 months. But I'm using my power for good now. But like, I was a master manipulator too. And so when I arrived at this place, I had it within a couple months, I had it like on lock as far as like how to manipulate my way to get what I want. And I would write these, like there was the guys dorms and the women's dorms. And I would write these elaborate sex stories and then I would make and fold them really tight. And then when we were like at meds or seeing each other in the hallway with the guys, I would pass them and then they would cheek their Adderall and give it to me. I would trade and then I would like write these stories. And at the end,
so you're like writing them porn. Basically, because I know in prison, so like my husband is in jail in prison when he was locked up, they would have like cards, the library cards they bring to the cells, and all the guys wanted like the romance novels because it's basically like the closest thing that you can get to porn is written word. So you were basically writing them porn. How old were you when you were there?
16 to 18.
Okay, and had you had sex when you got there?
Yes, but only once.
Okay, so it was just your imagination. That's crazy.
So I've always been a good writer.
That's a good little hustle. That's a good hustle. And you got Adderall for that. That's a great idea.
It was a great hustle, and I would write it like to be continued, until like right at the juiciest spot.
Yeah.
And then I would also like steal computer duster and like get the girls all in one room, and we'd be huffing the computer duster and then cheeking the Adderall. And then I would get like, they thought I was so good because I was still manipulating the system that they eventually gave me off-campus privileges. And then at that, I could go drink. So the whole time, I didn't make any meaningful changes whatsoever because I was hustling the whole time. And then when I got out, I actually did one good thing that I thought for my life was that I was 18 years old, and when you're 18, you can leave. But I went home for a home visit, and I came back because I was so close to graduating high school from there that if I didn't, I would take like another year to graduate high school from if I went back to Telluride. And so I did it. I went back. I mean, after I went home for my 18th birthday, got completely wasted. You know, my dad really freaked out. And then they were taking me back to the airport. And he knew that I'd done a bunch of cocaine and gotten really wasted on my 18th birthday and didn't come home. And so we're on our way to the airport, and he's just like, he can't even believe it. And he picks up a whole bottle of apple cider vinegar, and we're at the side of the road. I totally forgot this until right now. And he made me chug the bottle of apple cider vinegar in the hopes that I would pass the drug test when I got back in.
Did that work?
Yes.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It did. And I also put off the drug test.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And cocaine's out of your system pretty quick.
3 days or something. Yeah.
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 And
okay.
so I'm like by the road, like so hungover, feeling so awful, chugging apple cider vinegar, throwing up, and he's laughing at me. He's like, well, you did this to yourself. And then I went back, I passed the drug test, I graduated from high school, and then I enrolled in college, UVSC, Utah Valley State College, and tried to go to college and immediately fell in with a GHB cocaine dealer and became really close with him and got addicted to both GHB and cocaine.
Oh, wow. Okay. GHB, did the role that played, did that kind of come in to help you come down from the cocaine? Because GHB just knocks you out, right? That's one of the only drugs. I've never done that. I've never done GHB.
GHB is like essentially the date rape drug.
Right, I know.
So
like, and how do you do it? So the only reason to do it recreationally would be to come down from doing cocaine. Right?
No, it makes you feel like it's a party drug for sure.
If you don't do a ton of it.
If you don't do a ton of it and you don't mix it with alcohol.
Okay.
Because when you mix it with alcohol is when you pretty much like leave your body. Like you just don't remember anything, black out completely, like those sort of things. And so it was a party drug, and we did it like, I did it pretty excessively as I did everything. And after a while, I was there for about a year, and I stopped going to class. I stopped doing anything, and my dad came and rescued me, I would guess. And he took me back to Telluride, but I wasn't allowed to live at their house. And I kind of just floated around at different people's houses in Telluride and went from job to job. And I always had this really captivating way of being. And what that allowed me to do is probably hit a way lower bottom than I would have ever gotten to, because people floated me along. Do you know what I mean? Like they let me stay in their house for free. They gave me drugs. They took me out drinking. The girlfriends would dress me. I was like the funny doll. And I was always really exciting, always, you never kind of knew what was going to happen with me. And so I kind of floated around from house to house and lived in people's, shared a bedroom with some people and did that sort of scene. And it just progressed and progressed as it does.
How were you making money to pay for things, to buy food or this or that or whatever? How did you earn any money?
I worked at some restaurants that my dad he just recently sold it, but he had a restaurant in Telluride. And so I worked for him, and I could go get free food there. And so that was a big piece too, of being able to do that. Then the most significant part of my story happened, which was I met a man. His name was Todd, and he was, I remember the moment that I met him. I remember his hands in the air. I was friends with one of his friends. He had just moved from Pennsylvania. And I felt immediately attached to him. It was immediately. And it wasn't like he was like, oh, this dude is hot. He had a pot belly and crooked teeth, and he was really short, and he had these bright, beautiful eyes. And I was I'm so attracted to him. And he felt the same way. And we got involved in this pretty tragic romance where he really enabled my behavior. And by the time we were dating for a couple months, I told him, if I don't get out of Telluride, I'm going to die. Because
what drugs were you doing at that time?
I was at this point like doing painkillers here and there, but I was also smoking crack and doing cocaine and drinking a lot.
Okay, when does the crack come into the picture? What's the first time you smoked crack? Tell me that story.
I just have to tell you something so funny, just real quick, is that I did an interview with Sober Mom Life podcast,
Yeah.
and it was so PG compared to what
I
I'm
know.
telling you, because
I know.
it was.
I listened to some of it. That's okay. This is what my show, which I think you know, is this shit, the details. Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
I was very PG. So
Yeah, it was. I agree. Well, because her focus is like being a mom, and maybe you're not an alcoholic. You know what I mean? Like here, most of my listeners are like, yeah, we are for sure fucking junkies. So now what do we do?
No,
You know what
I
mean?
knew that because I've listened. I was like, okay,
Yeah,
we can get real here. It was basically, one drunken night. I remember having this thing where I was like, I'm not that bad because I'm not doing cocaine yet, right? And then I did cocaine. I'm not that bad because I didn't smoke crack yet. And then I crack. And I kept checking off the boxes. And I was like, oh, shoot, okay, I guess I'm just like blowing through these gates and it's whatever. And so by the time all my my group of friends started cooking up the cocaine that we were doing. And so I was like, okay, why not? And it was mostly, and here's the thing with the crack was that I didn't seek it out unless I was drinking. It was more the combination of the two. Like I never would have called myself a crackhead. Do you know what I mean? But I mean, I remember this one time I actually made a reel about it, and you're like, it's bad when you get drunk and you accidentally smoke some crack and then you put the crack pipe in your mouth wrong.
Oh
and you
my
God. and then you get like the blisters from the crack pipe, and then you tell everybody it's herpes because that's the better option.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
It's just herpes, guys.
It's like how the average person smokes a cigarette backwards, but you did a crack pipe backwards because you were so drunk. That's fucking hilarious. I wonder if there's gotta, not pod, if any of you guys have ever done that. Nobody's ever told me that. There's gotta be other people that were so drunk they smoked their crack pipe backwards accidentally. That's hilarious. Okay, so you tell the boyfriend, I'm gonna die, and the reason you think you're gonna die is because of the crack and the drinking, and that level of drug use is getting you to the point where it's bad.
It's so bad. I'm like the only thing, I can't be sober. I can't at this point. Like I cannot function without some alcohol or some drugs. And I was the type of like counting out change, going to the liquor store, my hands shaking, getting 100 proof peppermint schnapps.
Okay. And how old are you at this point that we're talking?
At this point, I was 22 or 23.
Okay. Did you think, I'm a drug addict, I'm an alcoholic, I have a problem? Or did you think I just need to manage the crack, or I need to leave Telluride, or what did you think?
I for sure knew that I was a drug addict, alcoholic. There was no doubt in my mind. I thought if I had pulled a geographic, then maybe things would get better. And so I told him, will you take me back to Pennsylvania, where he's from? And he said yes. And so we got in his car and we drove to Pennsylvania. And like, I remember getting a bottle of like 100 proof or whatever Southern Comfort on the way, and a bag of cocaine. And I was like pretty much blacked out until we got to Denver. And I was like, what are we doing? Okay, I guess we're going to keep going. And we went to Pennsylvania and stayed with his parents. And guess what? When I went there, I was there too. So that was the thing. And I continued to have the need to drink. I didn't get sober at all. And we were there for, there wasn't much crack or cocaine, but there was meth.
So did you start doing that?
Yeah, because it was available. And I worked, and then I got a job as a bartender there. And we were living in these little apartments behind a bar in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And nothing got better. And finally I was like, okay, like let's go back to Colorado and see if something changes there too. We lived there for about a year. We go back to Colorado and I am like, okay, I want to try to go to college again. Maybe that will help. And so we moved to Durango and I enrolled myself in college, and it was this persistent need to not be in reality. to not be present because it was the only way that I felt okay. And what would happen, and so many people will relate to this shame spiral. Even if you don't drink like the way that I drank or use the way that I used, I know that a lot of people can relate to drinking and then feeling shame over drinking and needing to drink to get rid of the shame. And that was the way that it was. And I was scared that I was going to die. And I didn't really have a hope that I was going to live past 30 at this age.
Did you ever try to go to another rehab or go to meetings, or were you just thinking, I just need to stop doing the drugs? Did you think you needed to quit drinking too, or did you think it was just the drugs? Like, did you make any attempts to get sober at that time?
No, I think like one night, there was one night that I didn't drink, and I was telling Todd that please don't drink because I'm really trying to not die of alcoholism. And then he decided that he wanted to drink, and he wasn't even really like to the excess that I was, but he drank that night. We got in a huge fight. I slapped him in the face. The cops were called. And they arrested me because they came and they asked what was going on. And I was like, well, he got drunk and I'm trying to not drink. So I slapped him in the face because he got in my face.
Right.
And they arrested me. And he
Well,
was like,
yeah.
yeah. I didn't realize because I was like, but he deserved it. And
Right.
then, and then he said the same thing. It was like, I deserved it. Don't arrest her. But it didn't matter. And so they arrest me, and I called my dad to bail me out. And he didn't. I spent the night. It was only one night that I was there. But I said, he was like, are you drunk? And I'm like, I'm not drunk, surprisingly. This is like the only time that I get arrested besides that other time. And I'm sober.
So you had some idea that you had a problem, but you weren't seeking out solutions through treatment or meetings at that time. Okay.
No, but then
Okay.
when I was 26 years old, I was drinking every single day. And one night I was in so much pain. I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, I'm dying. Like, that's what's happening, is I'm dying. And I was like, I'm just going to bear through it. It's going to be okay. I'm just going to get through it. And then finally I had to wake up Todd, and I was like, I think you need to take me to the hospital. And so he took me to the hospital, and it turns out that I had the worst case of pancreatitis that they'd ever seen in the history of this doctor's practice. My body was shutting down from alcohol use, and they put me on like a dilaudid drip, and I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then they let me out, and then cysts formed all over my stomach. And so then I had to go back to the hospital for another couple weeks. And then I had to have like my stomach drained. I couldn't eat for 3 weeks. I was just being fed through a tube. And it was heavy. And I remember my dad coming to the hospital and visiting me and saying, I want you to remember this suffering, because when you want to drink again, it's important that you remember. And then years later, when I went to AA, I remember reading in the big book that said that an alcoholic won't remember the suffering of a week or a month ago. And I was like, and I remembered my dad saying that to me.
Yeah, yeah. So you knew the pancreatitis was from alcohol. The doctors said, and the reason I asked is my husband just had pancreatitis last summer, and it was so bad. He thought he was going to die. I've never seen him like that. It was terrifying. And then we found out it was pancreatitis. And he doesn't drink. He's in recovery too, but he was never an alcoholic. And nobody ever said anything to him along the lines of, actually, maybe they did, and I just wasn't there. But I don't think anybody tried to say to him, maybe you're an alcoholic, something like that. Did people say that to you at that time? You knew it was related to alcohol? I mean, your dad knew somehow.
No, 100%. I knew
Okay.
100%.
Oh, you did?
That
Okay.
it was related to alcohol. I mean, I was drinking every day, all day. And self-proclaimed, I knew that I was an alcoholic. I knew exactly what this meant. And I stayed sober for 2 weeks after that, but I was on painkillers the whole time. And they told me if I ever drank again, that it could kill me. And then it's just so weird the way that an addict, alcoholic mind works. Because in 2 weeks, I was like, well, let's just try, right? And I was like, oh my God, let's just try to see if you'll die. And so I drank a beer and nothing happened. And I was like, okay, I guess I can drink again. So I started drinking again. But the real thing, I would drink rarely, but guess where it went then?
Crack.
No, it was the painkillers that they kept prescribing me, because that gave me that warm blanket feeling. And it was what I was looking for. And in my cognitive dissonance brain, they told me that I couldn't drink anymore, that drinking could kill me. But I was like, okay, so like this is healthier. Opiates are healthier for me. And then that started to escalate. I found out that the person that my mom had left my dad for, the one who was psychotic and had been in jail numerous times, that he also was a heroin addict. So then I realized that I could get heroin from him. So when the painkillers ran out, I needed to find more opiates. And so I started using heroin, but it was really interesting because at first I would smoke it, right? And then you pass through that gate, right? You're already doing heroin. And then I said, okay, well, I'll just shoot it into my butt, right? Because then it's
Like not finding a vein, just
yeah,
muscling. I have one
muscling.
question first, though. After the pain pills ran out, did you attempt to look for pills first and they weren't available, or you made the leap and connection to heroin first?
I attempted to look for pills.
You did. Okay, all right.
Yes.
And then somebody, because usually it's a connect who says you're not going to be able to find those, but this will do the same thing. Something like that
Totally.
happened. Okay.
Yeah, similar to that. And then I remember telling Todd, who was still there and loving me and supporting me because he always had a consistent job. He was always paying our rent. He was always just loving me and totally enabling me. And I got him to start doing the painkillers and I got him to start doing the heroin, even though he said, like, I would never do that. And I was like, and I would literally was like this, come on, you got to try it. You got to do it. And I got him into using it and it just completely snowballed because he became addicted to it. I was addicted to it. And we were living in Durango, which is 2 hours from Telluride, and our connect was in Telluride. And he would work all day, and then I'd be like, "You have to drive to Telluride. We have to go." And then I promise we won't go tomorrow. I promise we won't go tomorrow. We have to go. I remember one time I really wanted him to go, and he said he wasn't going to go, and so I told him that I had found some, and I put soy sauce in a rig, and I was like, "Oh, look, I found some." And then I said, "Oh, I'm just kidding, but just to get him to want it so bad, to see it, to like create the want that he thought it was there." And so then he drove me and we went there. And so then it's the same. We went back we moved to Telluride again to work, and it was the same thing. And then I said, maybe we can try to this. I did this a couple times where I was like, let's go to Pennsylvania now. Maybe I can get sober again. So we went back to Pennsylvania. My family found out that we were doing IV drugs before we left. And then we were in Pennsylvania. Then his parents found out and they kicked me out. And I got on a bus and I went back to Colorado, and he stayed in Pennsylvania with the hope that we would maybe apart be able to kick it. And then I went to trim weed in California. I got a ride up there. And the minute I get there, I was like, okay, maybe I can just like get away from this stuff. And then I'm like, get dropped off in a parking lot in California. And immediately 2 people come up to me and ask if I have an ID so that I can buy them some rigs.
Oh, shit. Okay.
I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Were you getting dope sick during this time? Like, did you get dope sick on the bus or
So many times.
Okay.
So many times suffering the worst pain you know about it. It's so bad that you'll just, and then throughout this whole time, I went to the hospital probably 10 times, different hospitals around the United States, so that I could because I was in so much pain, hopefully they'd give me like some morphine, give me some sort of relief from what was happening. And then, so in California, I was there and I got a phone call from my dad and he said, Todd is dead. He overdosed.
Oh, shit.
And it was right. I had called him a couple days earlier and I left with the phone and I had all the connections that we used in Pennsylvania. And he had asked me for a phone number that he had told me not to give him. And I gave it to him. And it was 2 days before Christmas, December 23rd. And this is how I explain what somatic work is sometimes to people, the connection between the mind body. Because when I was told what had happened, it felt like an axe had hit my chest. I literally fell over from the pain. I couldn't stand on my feet because it was so devastating. And the devastation of his friends, of his family, of my heart, I couldn't believe the intensity of the pain that I was experiencing. And the first part, I wanted to just check out, right? I was like, okay, like I want to die. Like this is too much. I love this person so much, and this is too much. And then after I pushed myself to almost want to die, like didn't even care. I was on the streets of San Francisco at this time, going
Doing
home with.
what?
I went to a further God, what was it? I don't know what they called themselves at the time. It was like the left of like Phil Lesh and Friends, like Grateful Dead
Oh, okay.
show in there,
Okay,
and I was
okay, okay.
trimming weed, and I had gone with some people, and then
Okay.
I just like they left me in San Francisco, and
You just
I
stayed?
and
Wow.
I was on the streets, and I met somebody, and he took me to this like super ghetto apartment, and we were smoking crack there, and I remember standing on this balcony and thinking like that I want to jump, that I was going to jump, and then there was this moment that something happened where I thought, I can't do that to every single person that I love. The intensity of this pain that I'm experiencing right now, I would do that to my dad, who I totally love. I would do it to my brothers. I would do it to and that's what I'm going to do after I lose somebody, is inflict this pain on everybody else. And I couldn't bear it. I didn't care if I died, but I cared how I affected every single other person in my life who loved me. And so I had that moment, and I called my dad and I said, I want to go to treatment. And I found some money, and there was one of his old friends from Grateful Dead tour who was at this same show in San Francisco, who met up with me and gave me some money.
Wow. Okay. So, because at that time, what year was this? You're 26 when this happens? 28,
No,
29?
this 26 was pancreatitis. This
Oh,
was
okay.
2028. This was 2 years later after the pancreatitis, because that was how long I was like
Okay. And
evolving my drug use.
right. And because at that time, insurance wouldn't have covered rehab and you wouldn't have had insurance anyways, right? You're just like a hanging out in the tenderloin kind of person.
I
So,
barely existed.
yeah. So how do you, and I just want to add here too, it's interesting that you say that. That was a thing that it didn't get me sober, but once I had a little bit of time, one of the things this time that kind of stopped me is, so my dad, he's retired now, but he's a pilot, and I love my dad. We're really like he's my favorite person, and he's friendly, right? Anytime he goes in the cockpit, he talks to the other pilots, and I can picture it in my head, be like, hey, Cole, hey, blah, blah. And I know they end up saying, oh, you got kids, I could not make my dad say, yeah, I have one, because there's two of us, right? I was like, I can't make him say, yeah, I have one kid. I used to have two, but like that thought of him saying that in a cockpit of an airplane somewhere was too much for me to fucking bear. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, I will not make him say that. I will not make him say that. But I do want to add here too, like for anyone that's listening that is the family member of someone, for years and years and years and years and years and years, I lived in a way that maybe he was going to have to say that every single day. So it doesn't mean that the person that you love that's using doesn't care. They might just not. I wasn't somewhere where I could recognize that until I had some clean time, 6, 7 months. And then I started thinking, you're never going to do this to them again. You're never going to make him walk into a cockpit and say that he has one child. And for some reason, that image just like really struck me. So, how did you find treatment? Where did you go and how did you pay for it?
Let me just say first that I was really like almost made me cry. It was really touching for me. So thank you for saying that. It was like, because I'm super close with my dad too. He's like my best friend. There was many years that by the grace of God, I survived of all the things that happened. So I appreciate that you said that. So my dad has money. I don't
Oh,
come
okay.
from my grandparents have money. He has money from my grandparents.
I guess Telluride is really nice, huh? That's how you guys were there. That's a nice area,
I mean,
right?
it is a nice place. We did live in low income housing on
Oh,
EBT,
okay, okay.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for a lot of the time. But my grandparents are from Aspen. It was so there's money there. So everybody else was like, "Don't do it. Like she's just going to waste your money. Look at her," And there was one person in my life who came to him and was like, "What is $10,000 or what is $20,000 to your daughter's life? Do it." And so he did it, and I went to treatment. And my younger brother, they had another child who's 20 years younger than me. He was 8 years old at the time. He helped pick out the rehab for me. We're actually the closest of the siblings. And they dropped me off at treatment center on his birthday.
Where did you go?
I went to this place. It was like, I can't even remember the name of the place because I'll tell
Or
you why.
where, I guess.
It was in Colorado Springs. It was in Colorado Springs. I was 28 years old. It was on his birthday. And then I was in there, and then I was so sick when they dropped me off at the treatment center that I was hospitalized a couple days later because I had an infection in my blood from using a dirty needle,
Right. Yeah.
essentially.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Or using like the cotton balls and like rinses.
Myocarditis. Yeah. Yeah. Like you used a cotton or something. Yeah.
And then reuse the
I
cotton.
got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really sick and I went to the hospital and then they gave me some, God, I don't know, like Suboxone. Yeah. And then so I went back.
What year was this?
This was 2013.
Oh, okay. So Suboxone was a thing. It was new, but it was a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it was, what was before Suboxone? What's the other stuff?
Methadone.
Methadone. Maybe it was methadone.
Oh, okay.
It might have been
2013 might have been Suboxone by then.
It was either one of those, but so I was weaning off. So I was back at the treatment center. And then halfway through my time there, the staff went on strike and the rehab closed because the CEO had relapsed. So he comes, this freaking, like, he was a dumpster fire, and he shows up at the rehab, no staff members, all the people who are, like, in the rehab, and then he opens up the med cabinet and starts giving us all our meds, gives me the bottle of methadone, and he was like, where do you guys want to go? And then some of the people's family members come pick up them, but my dad's like, I don't know, we're not taking you back here. And so he goes, well, we have a men's sober living. Do you want to go to the men's sober living? And I'm like, okay. And so they take me to the men's sober living and in Colorado Springs, and I'm in the men's section, and I have this bottle of methadone, and I start taking the methadone, of course, like not prescribed the way that it should be. And then my dad calls me and he goes, so there's another treatment center. Do you think you want to go to another one? And I was like, yeah, probably. So I went to the other treatment center, and there was some Native American culture with it. They went and we had a sweat lodge one day. And I had been claiming that my sober date was January 11th, my dad's birthday, when he dropped me off. And then we were in this circle doing the talking stick before we get into the sweat lodge, and the talking stick's to me. And I take out my 30-day chip out of my pocket and I give it to the person beside me. And I say, this isn't accurate because I did these methadone. And the reason why I did them, I tried to say in my head that it was because, like, I was prescribed then and everything is blah, blah, blah. But what I said at that moment was, I didn't want to feel the way that I felt. And so I took a drug, and that is not within the truth that I want to live, walking a sober life. And so I remembered the last time I took one of those, and I started my time over to February 14th of 2013. And that date is really significant to me because also it was love, essentially, that pushed me to the point of getting sober.
Yeah.
The love for somebody else.
You never used again? That's your current sober date still?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's my current sober date.
Damn, that's awesome. Okay.
And I went to 3 AA meetings a day, 2 AA meetings a day. I got a service position. I got a sponsor before I left the other rehab. I worked the steps really quick, and I dived deep into every single trauma that I'd ever experienced in my life. And I stepped the fuck out of victim, which was so important to my recovery, of stopping to say that this happened to me.
What was the victim narrative that you kind of held on to, and what did you switch it to? Like, were you like, well, I got raised on the road with the Grateful Dead, I never had a chance? Like, what was your narrative?
That was it. That was it. That was it. Yeah. And my mom left when I was 2 years old. I was abandoned. Nobody cared about me. Drugs were the only thing that made me feel okay. All that narrative was I'm a victim of circumstance, and that I had no control over what had happened in my life. And I needed to realize that everything happened the way that it was supposed to happen, and that I'm not a victim of my life. I'm the director of my life.
How did you shake the victim mentality around, I was raised on the road following the Grateful Dead? Because that's true, though. So how did you reframe that?
How did I reframe that? There's this book called The Book of Joy by Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And one of the 8 pillars of joy is perspective. And so the way that you look at things. And so the way that I looked at things was this happened, so I'm this way. But what I can look at it as, so I'm not a victim, is that it was divinely orchestrated to get me exactly where I needed to be in this lifetime. And so that everything happened is to teach me and raise me up and have me become the best version of myself, to be of service to humanity, so that it strengthens my character rather than makes me a victim of things happen. So I was a drug addict. I was a drug addict so I could be where I am now to learn what I needed to learn.
I fucking love that's my whole message is what you just said, and I didn't know that that was like a pillar of joy. I need to read that book. I'm literally going to start reading it probably like tonight. That sounds amazing. I love that. That's exactly what I did. My perspective shifted around my addiction, and I ended up deciding it wasn't the end of me, it was the beginning of me. I interviewed somebody on my show once, my friend Kevin, who said that a miracle is just a shift in perspective. That's the miracle of sobriety. That's the miracle of recovery. That shift in perspective that you had that allowed you to not be in the victim narrative anymore was an actual miracle for your life. So you started rewriting those narratives, and what else? What else did you do?
It was the beginning of what I call, and this is when I work with people as a somatic sobriety coach, what I see about the 12 steps, if I were to look at it in like from a different lens, stepping back, how I see it is a heart cleaning exercise. What I was seeing from myself is that I had layers and layers of gunk that I was holding in my heart that were worsened with using drugs too. And so, in like holding resentments and holding pain and suffering and victim mentality, like all within myself. And so, working the steps gave me the opportunity to start looking at some stuff, and so that I could start to clean it up and forgive myself and forgive others. And so, what this created for me was like that spiritual experience that we talked about. It gave me room in my heart for the creative intelligence of the universe to reside within me and help to guide and intuit my life.
Well, but I think you're probably going to get us there. But I was going to say, explain to my audience what somatic therapy is. And I'm assuming you're going to start to tell us how you end up to being this somatic sobriety coach, right? So walk us through what exactly that is.
So I realized that, in AA, they talk about the necessity to expand and develop your spiritual life. And for me, I like hit the ground running. I was like, what can I do? Because I realize that the more work that I do on myself, the better that I feel. And that you can continue to spiritually evolve in your life in order to experience more joy and more connection. And I became like a joy junkie in that way, where I was like, okay, like I want to keep doing this. And then like with AA, I know that people go their whole lives and that keep going to meetings and that it's really good for them. I personally am still like avidly working on myself, but it's very rare that I attend meetings anymore. And I don't would never recommend that to somebody who needs that consistency in that way, but have never deterred from any work that I have done on that I continue to do on myself and like the somatic work. And so what it was like, so I did steps more than once. And then I did some other healing processes that were like, I went to the Hoffman process in California to clear some generational trauma.
Okay. What does that look like? What do you do for that?
This was like a week long where I flew to California and you stay at this place and you do intense somatic work. And somatic work is the connection between the mind and the body. And that sometimes a lot of the time you can't think your way out of a situation. You kind of have to feel your way out of it. And trauma and things that have occurred in our life, I like saying it like this: things that have occurred in our life rather than things that happen to us, because it steps us again out of the victim mentality. They're saying things that occurred in our life are subject to getting stuck in our body. And the reason that like can be so effective with somatic work is the example that I gave already of like when Todd died, but also say you're in a car accident and then you're in a car right after that, or I don't know, even a couple months out of it, and then someone swerves a little bit and your whole body starts sweating and you're scared and like you're having a full physical reaction to something. That's because there's still unresolved trauma that is living in the body and being triggered at that moment.
You know, this is my first co-host, Kim, was a social worker, and we were standing in one of the rooms at my studio, and two cops walked in. I had 6 years or something, and two cops walked in, unrelated to me. They needed to talk to somebody else that was there. And they walked in and walked right up to me. And I spoke with them, and they gave me a card and they left. And then I remember looking at Kim, and she was like, "What happened?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I don't know. What?" And she was like, "You just had a whole visceral body reaction when you saw them." And I had years away from being arrested, but I can remember seeing those cops the second they walked in. I can feel it in my body right now. And I'm sure my audience can relate to that. So you're saying that's evidence of the way that experiences live in the body when you feel those responses again.
100%. 100%. And so I went on a journey. I went on a journey of self exploration and development. And it's so similar to, and I want to be really careful when I say these things about like that I don't attend meetings regular anymore, because I think that it's essential too for people to continue to work on their own spirituality and evolution if they want to be happy, healthy human beings.
I agree with that. Some sort of personal growth work.
Some sort of personal growth work. And for me, I wanted to continue to chip at the layers that were holding me back from becoming my best self. So what that looked like was moving some of the stuff that was limiting beliefs that lived within me. For instance, like, am I worthy? Am I safe? All these things that have been like my neural pathways for so long have worked this way, where I felt like I wasn't okay in my present moment, that it was unsafe.
How do you, and I want to make sure too, because I interrupted while you were telling us, how did you clear the generational trauma? And then I also want to know how you move limiting beliefs. What does that look like?
Okay, so the generational trauma is it goes back to also like the prayer of Saint Francis is how I look at it sometimes, is seeking to understand rather than to be understood, right? And then there is, for instance, I had all this stuff about my mother, about the way that she left when I was 2, like all these, she went and had another family and all this sort of stuff that was stuck within me and created a limiting belief about who I was and me as in my worthiness. Okay. And so the recognition, and this was through a lot of work of working to understand my mother and who she was, where she was at, and then the deep process of forgiveness to somebody else, to clear it from my heart, what I was holding it, and that it had nothing to do with me. And it had everything to do with who she was. And it doesn't have to transform into like any animosity, anything like that. It can, how I know if I've done enough forgiveness work around a certain incident is that I can imagine the incident, like I can imagine a situation in my life. And if I feel nothing but peace, then I know that the work is done. And so we can cultivate this ability to tap into not just our brain, but our physical body as well, to check in and get it to answer questions for us as well. So we can bring into our consciousness a situation, and then we can drop it down. And we can feel it in our body and feel it in our heart and see and tap into the present moment, which is something that for me, I tried to avoid for the majority of my life. And so what I'm doing here in this part of my life is the exact opposite of dropping in and being absolutely present with something and asking and getting curious with myself, like what needs to be seen, what needs to be felt here, so that I can find a way to peace.
Okay, so say you were working with me and I had a situation that was bothering me, and you would say, okay, put yourself in that situation. How do we work through the feelings? Like, what would you say to me? How would I let that go?
Of course, it's situation by situation, but first, what I do with my clients is I find the pain points.
Oh,
Okay.
like specific incidents.
Yes, specific incidences. And then I work a lot in metaphor. Okay. And so how I see it as like the human being as a whole has like seeds planted within our heart in our lives. Okay. And some of those seeds are thorns, and some of those seeds are beautiful flowers, right? Or fruits and flowers, and grow them throughout our life, like depending on what paths we take. Okay. And some of them are nurtured. Some of them are nurtured. Like even thorns are nurtured. Okay. And so some of the thorns for me would be like the limiting belief that I'm not worthy. Okay. Or that people will abandon me. Okay. That was like a limiting belief that I had, or that I wasn't safe. That was a big one. Okay. And so these were planted through experiences that happened in my life. And so what happens is that I act a certain way, right? Because of this belief that was planted in my heart. And so I find, say, a situation like something's coming up for someone again and again and again, and they don't know why they're acting in this certain way, right? So we work to find the pain point, the feeling first. We can drop into our bodies and find the feeling that's happening. So like for me, the feeling is like, I'm unsafe, right? That's the feeling. Where does that come from? Right. And sometimes people feel so unsafe with those memories that I have to create this good rapport, which I always do with my clients, of feeling safe, that they can explore these memories that are really difficult and find them and unlock them in a way so that we can move through the process of healing them, so that belief can be dissolved. And when that belief is dissolved, we can access a higher level of love and peace and connection and like all that fucking good.
So just putting yourself back in it and feeling the feelings, that's how it releases?
There's a lot of processes that I use with people
Okay.
too, but
Okay.
a lot of it has to do with hypnotherapy and guided meditations that I record for my clients too. So I do there's some that I use for all my clients that are really necessary, and there's some that I do specific for a person where they really need to work on something, and they can listen to them and then tap into their hearts and their feelings until and the reason why I know this works so well is because I'll tell you something really heavy is that there was a lot of blame that I had for myself over Todd's death. And there were so many people who said, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. And I couldn't forgive myself. Like it was stuck. It was like one of those like gnarly spots in my heart where like it was like a cloudy day always because of that feeling. And someone told me once that I love and I trust, this powerful person in my life said to me, I think that you have to recognize your part that you played in it. And when you do, you will find freedom. And so I said to myself, okay, like I pressured this person into doing these drugs that they didn't want to do that ultimately killed them. And that I can totally understand why so many people said it wasn't my fault. I get it. Absolutely. And in order for me to arrive at a place of forgiveness, I needed to look at the situation head on and see my part, because if I was like, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was, I could never arrive to a place where I could clean myself of it. And so I came to a place and I looked at it head on and I'm like, okay, like this wasn't, and I felt the pain. This is the process that I work with people through, is finding the pain point and fucking feeling it. Right. So I sat with it and I felt it and I cried and I shaked, because somatic, we want to shake. We want to move energy in our body that was stuck. So I'm like moving this shit, crying, and like feeling the pain. And then I began the process, and this is what I leave my clients, finding the pain point, right? And then we do a guided meditation that I made about compassion, self-compassion, compassion for others, right? And to start to soften this. And then after we feel the pain and arrive at the place of compassion, then I do a self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others meditation that I guide them through, and so that they can truly release it and leave it in the past in that way. There's some other exercises that I have people do to actually do the somatic release. Like there's some wiffle ball bat stuff that I do if there's a lot of anger. There's also like there's writing journal prompts and stuff too, to just go deep and move stuff out.
And anybody can work with you. You do this online, right? So
I
somebody
do
can
this
be
online.
anywhere, right? Okay.
I have clients from all over the country.
Okay. What was the process of you getting did you get like certified in this? Did you study this? Because I remember there was a somatic school in Arizona that I was looking at once upon a time. What did you do for this?
After I got sober, I got a degree. I finished my degree in psychology and sociology. And then after that, I got I was going to go get a degree in clinical psychology too, to become a therapist. And then I had 2 kids instead, which was great. And it was even more than a degree in psychology. And then I decided that I wanted to really help people propel themselves into their brightest future. And so I got I got certified as a life coach, integrative wellness, like where I work specifically in balancing mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical aspects of self. And then I realized too, I came to this realization. I was like, people can't go bounding gloriously into their future with a bag of rocks attached to them. We need to deal with things like from our past in order to create the bright future that we want. And so then I got a certification in integrative somatic trauma therapy so that I could work with people to clear that stuff up, and then so that they can really truly like create the life that they want.
I love this. This is so cool. And how long have you been doing it now?
Now I've been doing it for 2 years, and I pivoted a little bit. I've had some clients that are not in recovery, but then I was like, I want to focus on what I know best. And so then I pivoted from I was a joy coach, like dissolving what was blocking people from feeling intrinsic, radiant joy. And then I pivoted because I just know the depths of addiction so well, and it's so close to my heart that this is what I wanted to do. Like, this is the people that I wanted to serve, because some of the most extraordinary people that I've ever met are people who have gone to the depths of the darkness and come out like a phoenix.
So do people see you once they're already like sober, or does it not matter? Can they be, I want to get sober, and they can start this work with you then? I mean, I'm assuming both ways works.
Both ways have worked. I've got clients who came to me when they were 5 months sober and just really wanting to create more stability in their sobriety and have more longevity, because I've got an incredible success rate with people. And then I've had people who came and they were still drunk on their interview, and I've helped them to totally transform their lives through their want. And it helps that I honestly, like, sometimes people need to pay money to change.
Yeah.
I know that I did
I get
too.
that.
Like, they're like, they're like, if they'll stay more accountable when they
that happens at my studio all the time. Like, when we have people that are kind of coming in on ClassPass, I'm like, bro, you need to commit to a membership. I'll give you a deal. I totally understand that. Or like, we do late cancels, and that's why, because they don't want that $15 late. You know what I mean? It is definitely an incentive. Well, speaking of your coaching, how can everybody connect with you and find you?
So through Instagram it's joyfully.sober. And then it says Elan Hardy, Somatic Sobriety Coach.
Okay. And the links to everything are in there.
The links to everything, to get a consultation. And I work with people wherever you're at in your sobriety. If sometimes, as I've said, like, I've had people come to me who have some time, and they just really, just like I did. I had years into my sobriety when I did the Hoffman process.
I mean, like, there are things I hold on to physically. I know. In fact, actually, I did this wild. I went and saw like a healer right as I sold my studio, and it's a mess, but I sold it to this guy, and he went out of business in like 8 weeks, and I was devastated, because it was like my heart was outside of my body with this business, and it was falling apart. And I went and saw this lady, and as she was going through, I went for something else. I went for something else. And while she was going through my body, she was asking me to tell her what I felt. And I felt like my feet and my toes from walking to the bus and walking around being homeless. And then she asked me the next thing I felt, and I felt like my wrist, because I used to shoot heroin there where you're not supposed to. And it was so
Me
weird.
too.
I had like 8, yeah. Did you? I had
like wrists.
Dude, a friend of mine is a phlebotomist, and she said, you're not supposed to do, only doctors can do that. She can't even do that, because you can like paralyze yourself. I was like,
no, I know.
What?
That's the only place
I
I
did
did
shit
it.
all the time. Oh, really? That's crazy. But so it just shocked me that at 8 years, what was coming up for me was using memories 8 years later. So I know that stuff can get really like locked into your body. So yeah, I'm sure you can be in early stages of sobriety or later, I mean, like, I can only see this as incredibly helpful basically wherever you are, like, as an adult,
For sure. And one of the greatest things that I've discovered in my life is the process of healing oneself and arriving at new levels of your best self. And I love discovering new imperfections in myself, because I know that on the other side of that is a better version, a happier version of myself. So to always keep looking, always keep growing, always keep arriving at the better version of yourself that's on the other side of imperfections.
I love that. You are speaking my language. This kind of stuff I talk about in classes all the time. I fucking love this. So joyfully.sober, I'm going to put it in the show notes and people can contact you.
Awesome.
Thank you so, so much for your time. I hope it's okay. We're a little more detailed than the sober mom. You know,
Dude,
there's
I
a
was
spot
ready.
for that. There's a spot for that. And there's a spot for this. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's important to say that you can shoot heroin into that part of your wrist and then you can be like you and me and sit here on a laptop and have a computer that I like have a conversation with a laptop I haven't sold. You know, I think it's important to say how gnarly it can be when you really actually see the evidence, you know? So.
Well, how gnarly it can be and how awesome it can be. And how awesome and beautiful and magical life can be. This is the good stuff. Thank you so much.
Totally. Thank you so, so much for your time. I really appreciate it.